This week, a prophecy update. We're going to start into the 7 churches of Revelation, just a little bit on Ephesus. The convergence of events that we see is absolutely stunning. As I looked through things this week and tried to select what it was I would talk about and know that I need to keep it within a certain time frame, it was extremely difficult. Things are accelerating and happening very, very quickly. When I talked to Jacob on Thursday night, he called me, and he's in England right now, and I said, things are happening very quickly. The way churches are backing off, not teaching Bible prophecy, thinking that Bible prophecy or discernment are topics that are too controversial. Jacob says it's happening all over. It's happening everywhere. And all of this stuff is coming into the church, especially so quickly that he said, Jesus has got to be coming soon. It's just, Jesus has got to be coming soon. I've never seen anything like this. It's just something that's unprecedented in church history. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, it says that, 2 Timothy chapter 3, it says, but no, realize this. Remember, this is Paul writing from prison, the last letter that he wrote to Timothy, the longtime faithful partner in his ministry. Timothy, but realize this, that in the last days, difficult times will come, for men will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, revilers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, malicious gossips, without self-control, brutal, haters of good, treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to a form of godliness, although they have denied its power. Avoid such men as these. And boy, does that ever describe the world in which we live in. Just some things that you should be aware of. This is from the front page of the Arizona Republic today, talking about the fact that measurable snow in January in the mountains of northern Arizona, 0.0 inch is. And the other statistic, which is the amount of precipitation along the Little Colorado River in January, 0.1 inch, which is 2% of normal January. This is going to have impact on food supplies, food prices, I think. I often wonder if what's going on in our bread baskets in our country is related to this type of thing. The agenda of the current administration, broader rights for same-sex couples. There's I think I mentioned to you a young man named Matthew Vines who has a thing called the Reformation Project. Now we know that about 500 years ago the Reformation took place. Martin Luther nailed the theses to the wall. Now Reformation in today's society means accepting gay, active, practicing gay, lesbian, homosexual people into the church without judgment, without recognizing their sin. We all sin, but it's celebrated now. And he has a book coming out, his name is Matthew Vines, called God and the Gay Christian. And he's running around, he has people in all 50 states that are assisting him to reform the church, the evangelical church, to be more accepting for gays. And it's coming like a flood. Jesus said it would be like this in the end days. He used the specific example of the days of Lot. And we live in the days of Lot. And I do not believe it is possible that God will bring a revival. It is possible. God will always preserve a remnant. God will always have faithful followers, and those faithful followers will evangelize and disciple new faithful followers. But the scriptural remnant, the scriptural motif is always a remnant, not a large, massive full-scale revival. I appreciate reports that I see about revivals, but I'm telling you that I do not see scriptural support for that in the end times. I just do not see it. I see the exact opposite. Another thing with the economy, this is a little chart that shows the period of time during which different countries, their currency was the reserve currency of the world. So you see back in the 1400s, in the 15th century, it was Portugal, then Spain, then the Netherlands, then France. Britain had a pretty good run from the mid-1700s to about 1925, when it was replaced by the United States. So we're coming up on about 90 years where the US dollar has been the reserve currency of the world. If that stops being the reserve currency of the world, our lives will change. We live in a time of rapid change, and I don't think that that's going to change. This is just to show how people have lost their ability to reason. This is the NAACP rally, March for Justice, down in North Carolina, okay? To oppose immigration reform, or to oppose any requirement that somebody who comes in to vote show a picture ID. You know, picture ID you gotta show to get concert tickets, you gotta show at the drugstore, you gotta show everywhere. But you can go vote and you don't have to have a picture ID. So the NAACP had a march this weekend. This was their PDF document I downloaded from their website, showing what requirements you needed. If you're gonna march for justice and oppose these evil people that wanna require picture IDs, you need to conduct yourselves. Be nice, be cordial, be civil. And then this thing right here, it says, do bring photo identification, driver's license, passport, or other valid photo ID with you and keep it on your person at all times. Okay? People are losing the ability to reason. Now we're going to talk about the Middle East. We didn't talk too much about that last week. Then we'll talk a little bit, intro to Revelation and 7 churches. This is Prime Minister Erdogan of Turkey, and this is a hologram. Now, this is a big rally in Turkey. And you're going to see Prime Minister Erdogan, the Islamic leader of Turkey. He's not there. Hang on. He appeared by a hologram. Now, the dramatic increase in the use of technology in the world and culture is phenomenal. Things that they're talking about implanting, cyborg soldiers. I've been reading article after article of this over the last couple of weeks. This is another thing where there's just been this explosion, transhumanism, and creating the perfect man, building the perfect man, injecting nanobots into people so that they have, so they're smarter, they have better recall. Google wants you to be able to, I guess, sort of log in to Google without having to have a computer. And that will make you smart. But this is the type of thing, you should understand the prophetic significance of this. It says in Revelation, talking about the Antichrist, he performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth because of the signs which it was given to him to perform in the presence of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who had the wound of the sword and has come to life. And it was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast would even speak and cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And it causes all small and great, rich and poor, and free men and the slaves to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. I only played that clip to show that the technology now exists, that the Bible that John wrote about on the Isle of Patmos in Revelation near the end of the 1st century AD, the technology now exists for much of that, all of that it talks about in Revelation to occur. Things that people didn't know how they would do it, it now exists from the standpoint of technology. Nothing else needs to be put in place for all of the events of the end times to unfold. Now I'm going to move to a clip of President Obama at the State of the Union. And I want to issue a disclaimer. The fact that I have just read something about the Antichrist, you should not connect to the next clip, okay? Because it would be I do not make the assumption that the Antichrist is a Sunni Muslim. He might be a Shiite Muslim, okay? Think about that, you'll get it a little bit later. President Obama at the State of the Union talking about some things in the Middle East.
These negotiations will be difficult. They may not succeed. We are clear-eyed about Iran's support for terrorist organizations like Hezbollah, which threatens our allies. And we're clear about the mistrust between our nations, mistrust that cannot be wished away. But these negotiations don't rely on trust. Any long-term deal we agree to must be based on verifiable action that convinces us and the international community that Iran is not building a nuclear bomb. If John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan could negotiate with the Soviet Union, then surely a strong and confident America can negotiate with less powerful adversaries today. The sanctions that we put in place help make this opportunity possible. But let me be clear. If this Congress sends me a new sanctions bill now that threatens to derail these talks, I will veto it. For the sake of our national security, we must give diplomacy a chance to succeed. If Iran's leaders do not seize this opportunity, then I will be the first to call for more sanctions and stand ready to exercise all options to make sure Iran does not build a nuclear weapon. But if Iran's leaders do seize the chance, and we'll know soon enough, then Iran could take an important step to rejoin the community of nations, and we will have resolved one of the leading security challenges of our time without the risks of war. And finally, let's remember that our leadership is defined not just by our defense against threats, but by the enormous opportunities to do good.
Okay. In case you don't know what trust means, it's the belief that someone or something is reliable, good, honest, effective, and verifiable means capable of being verified. At the Davos World Economic Forum a couple weeks ago, Rouhani was there, and of course he gave the usual, the Iranians were prepared to join the international community and that sort of thing. The next day, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, who is one of the targets of Iran targets the big Satan, that's the United States, that would be us sitting here today, and the little Satan, Israel. This is Benjamin Netanyahu's response to some questions about Iran.
There's a tremendous change in the Middle East. The way that I see it, with my own eyes, being in touch with various governments, you see a shift because Central Arab governments right now in the Middle East are Sure, they want to see a solution to the Palestinian problem. They do, as we do. But their primary preoccupation is with two threats. One, the arming of Iran with nuclear weapons. Many of them are just as concerned about it as we are. And second, they're concerned with the spread of the Muslim Brotherhood. We share those twin concerns. And so these governments do not see Israel as their enemy, but in many ways as their, if not ally, then their partner in holding back these dual threats. So this is a shift. This is a point in time where we could get more support, more Arab support for, I think, a reasoned solution between Israel and the Palestinians than we had before, principally because they really want to have a partnership with all the countries in the Middle East against these real threats. And believe me, they're not reassured by the soft words that were said here this morning by the president of Iran. They get it. They understand that these are, a change of words with unchanging deeds. They understand that Iran remains aggressive, that it supports terror, that it participates in the slaughter in Syria, that it's pursuing the development of ballistic missiles and plutonium for nuclear weapons. They get it right, and we get it right.
And of course, the Prime Minister mentioned that Iran's continued stance about their centrifuges means that there's really no way that Israel's going to sign on to any permanent accord, despite what our President and Secretary of State and others say. James Clapper, who works at our National Security Administration, he's the Director of National Intelligence. In late January, about a week and a half ago, he went to Congress to testify. One of the things that he presented to Congress was a report called the Worldwide Threat Assessment of the U.S. Intelligence Community, prepared for the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And a couple things that you should know that are in that report, and you'll see his testimony before the Senate. One of the things that it says here is Tehran has made technical progress in a number of areas, including uranium enrichment, nuclear reactors, and ballistic missiles from which it could draw if it decided to build missile deliverable nuclear weapons. These technical advancements strengthen our assessment that Iran has the scientific, technical, and industrial capacity to eventually produce nuclear weapons. This makes the central issue its political will to do so. Now, Commentary Magazine said this: it would seem that we are being told that Iran is now ready and able to get the bomb, and all that remains to be seen is whether it is willing. With that comes the implication that this political willingness is the last thing that we might have any leverage over. The report also said this: we judge that Iran would choose a ballistic missile as its preferred method of delivering nuclear weapons. If Iran ever builds these weapons, Iran's ballistic missiles are inherently capable of delivering weapons of mass destruction, and Iran already has the largest inventory of ballistic missiles in the Middle East. Iran's progress on space-launched vehicles, along with its desire to deter the United States and its allies, provides Tehran with the means and motivation to develop longer-range missiles, including an intercontinental ballistic missile. On Iranian TV this week, they aired a video simulating the bombing of Tel Aviv and attack on the U.S. aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln. John Kerry then went. It's been very interesting to watch all of these developments over the last couple of weeks with all of the major end-time players being very, very prominent. We had the Davos World Economic Forum. They then went from there to the Munich Security Conference, and here was John Kerry talking at the Munich conference.
So today we are witnessing youth populations, huge youth populations, 65% of a country under the age of 30, under the age of 25 in some places, 50% under the age of 21, 40% under the age of 18, unemployed, disenfranchised, except for what globalization has brought them in their capacity to be able to reach out and see what the rest of the world is doing, even as they are denied the opportunity to do it too. An enormous, desperate yearning for education, for jobs, for opportunity. That's what drove Tahrir Square, not the Muslim Brotherhood, not any religious extremism, but young kids with dreams. That's what led that fruit vendor in Tunisia to self-immolate after he grew too tired of being slapped around by a police officer and denied his opportunity just to sell his fruit wares where he wanted to. We are facing threats of terrorism and untamed growth in radical sectarianism and religious extremism, which increases the challenge of failed and failing governments and the vacuums that they leave behind. And all of this is agitated by a voracious, globalized appetite and competition for resources and markets that do not always sufficiently share the benefits of wealth and improved quality of life with all citizens.
Here's the takeaway from what he said. First of all, go home and say a prayer of thanksgiving that he was never elected president. What you should learn from this Orwellian doublespeak that comes out of the mouth of people in our government, both aisles, both sides, is stunning. You are being prepared, people in the world are being prepared for the Antichrist, who will be Mr. Big Mouth, Mr. Liar, possessed directly by Satan. You are seeing the world leaders lying on a massive scale to you. And so Obama says to Congress, if you send me a thing, I'm all for sanctions, but if you send me a bill with sanctions, I'll veto it. Clapper goes to Congress and says, the only thing that is really holding back Iran now is whether or not we can determine whether they have the political will to do this. A country that inspires and trains people to be suicide bombers, and you question whether they have the political will to do something, that's foolish. But, as I have said many, many times, Jesus said that there would be massive deception in the end times. And when that deception comes, it operates on every level. It's someone coming into the church trying to get people to accept people involved in active sin as just normal Christians. It involves politicians lying to you and doing it with some degree of confidence. Here's James Clapper talking about the threat. Now, of course, Kerry just said at the Munich Security Conference, essentially, it's not about religion. It's not about Islamic extremism. It's economic opportunity. Okay, now we're going to listen to the Director of National Intelligence talk at a hearing in front of Congress.
Do you have an intelligence assessment of the impact of the interim agreement on Iran's nuclear program? Does it slow it down, pause it? The requirements, as you know, about dilution and limitations of centrifuges and those kinds of things. Is this going to have a real impact on the progress of the nuclear capability in Iran?
Yes, it will, Senator King. Clearly, it gets at the key thing we're interested in and most concerned about is the more highly enriched, the 20% enriched uranium. So, yes, it does.
Well, you need to do what I do. You need to go take an FBI course on how to tell if people are lying when they're talking to you, or just watch politicians and watch how they conduct themselves.
The second question, you told us back on the 20th, quote, we judged that that new sanctions would undermine the prospects of a successful comprehensive nuclear agreement with Iran Iranian Foreign Minister Zarif in early December said that the entire deal would be, quote, dead if the international community imposed new sanctions. Is that still your view?
Yes, sir. It would be good to have them in reserve if we need them. Right now, the imposition of more sanctions would be counterproductive.
How do you mean in reserve? If the Congress passed them, would you consider?
Well, obviously the Iranians understand our system, and the point there is that if we had additional sanctions right now, I think this would, the Iranians would live up to their word, and it would jeopardize the agreement. But they understand that this is a subject of great interest in the U.S. Congress, and to me, just that fact alone is a great incentive to ensure compliance with the bargain.
So what you're suggesting is we don't need new sanctions, even those that have a delayed trigger. It's the knowledge that Congress can impose them that provides the impetus.
That would be my view, yes, sir.
There have been 6 United Nations Security Council resolutions calling for a total halt to Iran's uranium enrichment over the last 20 years. Not a single one of them has worked. Again, the deception that people will operate under will operate on a massive scale, and is in the end times. And this morning, Iran says warships are heading close to the U.S. borders. Now, why would they want to do that? One of the things that Iran has been doing is they've been practicing shooting ballistic missiles as high as they can into the air. Why are they doing that? EMP, electromagnetic pulse. If they shoot something that explodes over the middle part of the United States, we will effectively be without a power grid for a period of time. Robert Kaplan, in a couple articles at Stratfor, you can go to stratfor.com and read these. Now, he's a non-religious man, he's a man of the left, but he's a good analyst of history. He's actually not too bad. He wrote a book, an article back in April last year called Anarchy and Hegemony, talking about the fact that there are no real world powers anymore. He followed that up with an article last week, or this week, called Why So Much Anarchy? Why does it seem that everything in the world is falling apart? And it's not just the Middle East. You have problems in Indonesia, Thailand, Burma, India, China. It seems like everywhere there are problems. And Kaplan says this in this article: because we are talking here about the long-term processes rather than specific events, anarchy in one form or another will be with us for some time, until new political formations arise that provide for the requisite order. And these new political formations need not be necessarily democratic. This is a secular man writing this, okay? This week, in one of the leading intelligence, if not the leading intelligence agency in the world. The real question marks right now is what's going on are Russia and China. The possible weakening of authoritarian rule in these sprawling states may usher in less democracy than chronic instability and ethnic separatism that would dwarf in scale the current instability in the Middle East. Read that again. The possible weakening of authoritarian rule in China and Russia may usher in less democracy than chronic instability and ethnic separatism that would dwarf in scale the current instability in the Middle East. Indeed, what follows Vladimir Putin could be worse, not better. The same holds true for a weakening of autocracy in China. And he concludes with this: the future of world politics will be about which societies can develop responsive institutions to govern vast geographical space and which cannot. That is the question toward which the present season of anarchy leads. Now look, folks, we know what the Bible says, where this is leading. And it's leading to a world leader that will be a deceiver possessed by Satan who will attack the people of God, Israel and Christians. And you just need to know that it's coming. Other things are happening. This was an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal this week, front page. mystery assault on power grid. Now this happened back in April 16th of 2013. Nobody heard about it. What happened was there was an attack on a power station outside of San Jose, California. They went in, they cut the phone lines, they then shot up the transformers, completely destroyed the station. It took 2 hours for anyone from the utility to arrive on the scene, because all the phone lines were cut and they couldn't communicate. Now, the FBI assures us that this is just, you know, some people having some brewskis, I think, and going out. This is what one person said. This wasn't an incident where Billy Bob and Joe decided after a few brewskis to come in and shoot up a substation. Mark Johnson, retired VP of Transmission for PG&E, told the Utility Security Conference, according to a video of his presentation. This was an event that was well thought out, well planned, and they targeted certain components. What was it? It was a dry run. Yes. Very likely. And the concern among you, if you read the article in the Wall Street Journal, you'll probably want to go buy a generator because they're talking about attacks like this happening all over the country on the power grid to get what they want. Here's Obama talking at the State of the Union. This is about the Palestinian peace process.
As we speak, American diplomacy is supporting Israelis and Palestinians as they engage in the difficult but necessary talks to end the conflict there, to achieve dignity and an independent state for Palestinians, and lasting peace and security for the state of Israel, a Jewish state that knows America will always be at their side.
I think Mr. Netanyahu would say, prove it. Yeah. One thing you also need to know is there is another indicative thing that we live in the end times is the rise of anti-Semitism and a recasting of history. This is a book written by John B. Judas, Truman, American Jews and the Origins of the Arab-Israeli Conflict. And it's his view that it's just the political lobby of Israel supporters in the United States that are causing all the problems in the world. The book was just published this week. This also is coming out. We'll talk a little bit more about this. It's called Zionism Unsettled. It's put out by the PC USA, Presbyterian Church USA, and it has a nifty little DVD. Might mean we need to get it for small groups. DVD and study guide for why Zionism is denial of justice and therefore unbiblical. Here's Rashid Khalidi is quoted in the brochure. Rashid Khalidi is an anti-Semite of the first rank. He is a professor at Columbia University, professor of Arab Studies. This is what he said. The denial of the rights of the Palestinians is largely driven by the exemption of Zionist ideology and its real-world implications from any serious scrutiny. Zionism Unsettled explains accurately and concisely why it is essential to look at the theological roots of Zionism and how it has appealed to both Jews and Christians in order to understand the true nature of the long ordeal suffered by the Palestinian people, as well as the real roots of so much of the strife in the Middle East. Walter Brueggemann. Do you know who Walter Brueggemann is? He's a theological professor at Columbia Theological Seminary. He is one of the leading theologians of the emergent church. This is one of the guys that they love to cite. He says this: the urgency of the Palestinian plight in the face of Israeli intelligence indicates that intentional, concrete, and sustained public action is necessary to respond credibly to the crisis. Zionism Unsettled will prove an effective vehicle for helping to mobilize public opinion so that both attitudes and policies can be transformed in the face of an imperious and exploitative ideology. That is the language of Orwell. That is the language of a leftist. That is the language of a man who claims to be a Christian, but his leftism is really the religion that he believes in. Not the God of the Bible, not the Bible that God has given us, but his leftism that drives his ideology. You need to understand that when you hear these people talk. And this all occurs Holocaust Day. Picture, this is an interesting scene. This is what it looked like back in the time. This is the entrance to Auschwitz. The Jews arriving. This is what it looks like today. A delegation of his members of the Knesset, half of the Israeli Knesset, went there to visit, many of them for the first time, to see what had happened. And here is a couple of them talking, including Naftali Bennett. Here's what they had to say.
Yes, it is my first time in this cursed land of Poland. I haven't come here. I came here today with a delegation of members of Knesset. As a proud Jew, we are very proud to be here. And we know we can rely only on ourselves, not on anyone else, including our friends in the US, in Europe. We should count only on ourselves.
This is my first time in Poland and in Auschwitz. My family is buried in Poland, my grandmother, my grandfather. And I keep thinking, where were the Allies? Where was the United States of America? One bomb could have put an end to this machine. And they didn't care. No one cared. My lesson is that only the state of Israel will defend Jews and never depend on anyone else.
Well, we saw unfortunately that the US failed to bomb Auschwitz, and when they could have done it, they said it's not part of the war effort. And when you see the pictures here and you see the numbers here, you ask yourself, what is the war effort when millions of Jews were massacred here?
I think it's important for young Israelis, all Israelis, Jews from around the world to come here to see this from
I think it's essential. I was thinking about my son who is reaching the age of 13, that in a few years he will come here, he will see it on his own eyes. You have to be here in order to understand what really happened here.
Over 1 million Jews killed at that facility, Auschwitz, Poland. On Holocaust Remembrance Day, Catherine Ashton, the European Special Foreign Minister, had this to say. This was the statement she released. This is about the day they remember that Jews were slaughtered, okay? This is the bulk of all of her statement. Today, the international community remembers the victims of the Holocaust. We honor every one of those brutally murdered in the darkest period of European history. We also want to pay a special tribute to all those who acted with courage and sacrifice to protect their fellow citizens against persecution. On Holocaust Remembrance Day, we must keep alive the memory of this tragedy. It is an occasion to remind us all of the need to continue fighting prejudice and racism in our own time. We must remain vigilant against the dangers of hate speech and redouble our commitment to prevent any form of intolerance. The respect of human rights and diversity lies at the heart of what the European Union stands for. What did she leave out? What did she not mention in that statement about the Holocaust? Jews. Because that doesn't fit. We're out of time. It is an interesting time to be alive. So much is happening so quickly. People that I know who I would classify as watchmen, every single one of them tells me that they just cannot believe what they're seeing. That certainly the Lord's return must be getting closer. And when things really begin to happen in the end, they will happen very quickly, very rapidly. There will be an acceleration that if your head is spinning already, it will spin faster. I certainly believe this is the time. All of the players are there, all of the things are in place, all of the major players of the end times are doing exactly what the prophets predicted. And there are many, many reports. There's much, much more that I could go into, so we'll go into that next week. talk about some other things that happened at the Munich Security Conference, and we will talk about the church at Ephesus. And I have some clips that I want you to play. I want you to think about that church. A church that Jesus wrote a letter to. That church that had Jesus commend them for some of the things that they were doing, for their discernment. But they had lost their first love. And we'll look at some examples, I think some very apparent recent examples of that losing the first love. I mean, you go to Turkey today, all of those the letters to the 7 churches were written to real live churches in Turkey. They're all gone. All of the lampstands have been removed. The churches are gone, and the church at Ephesus is a stunning example of what happens if you don't stay faithful. And we'll talk about that perseverance and a little bit about how you accomplish that, how we as a church should accomplish that so we can keep our lampstand. That church started out founded by the Apostle Paul. Not a bad Bible teacher. Followed up by the Apostle John. Pretty good tradition that Mary, the mother of Jesus, and John moved to Ephesus. And John was in charge of the church there for a time, and Mary, tradition tells us, is actually buried there. But it lost its lampstand, and we'll talk about why. Father, thanks for this time together. Thanks so much for Mike's message today. Help us to remember that we need to be out there fulfilling the Great Commission, making disciples, and with respect to ourselves, persevering in our faith. Knowing that our perseverance is for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to bring glory to you, our Lord and Savior. Bless us this week. Give us opportunities to share the gospel. In Jesus' name, amen.